When you were reading the original Harry Potter series, have you ever wondered how a household broom could achieve flight? How could Hermione use a time turner to reverse time? How could Dumbledore displace matter at will? The New Yorker describes Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality as a retelling of Rowling's original in an attempt to explain Harry's wizardry through the scientific method. Let me back up for a minute and describe how I came upon this book. I recently read the Steve Jobs biography. Instead of wearing blue jeans and a turtleneck, I decided to do the more sensible thing and walk with two friends across the park, and we spoke about potential books to read together after our final exams next week. We were throwing out ideas from the Foundation series, and yes, I had not read that series yet, to Neil Stephenson, to biographies from various prominent people, who more accurately speaking got quite lucky and got to weave a narrative of how amazingly prophetic their decisions were. One of my friends suggested that I read this book called Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. My first response was, what? Did JK Rowling write another book I didn't know about? My friend laughs and says, no, it's a fan fiction. I say, oh, okay, although I was quite skeptical what another author could write that JK Rowling had not addressed already. How could another author live up to the best-selling series in history? The author was a guy by the name of Eliezer Yudkowsky. A quick Google search shows that he is an AI researcher and writer. Taking a read of his website, it becomes clear that Yudkowsky is not your average fan fiction writer.
Our next speaker, he's the author of the most popular Harry Potter fan fiction online. Yes, really. It's called Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. All right, here we go. Eliezer Yudkowsky.
Is the microphone on? Yes, it is. Okay, I am known for one or two other things, really.
Anyhow, I doubted that JK Rowling would allow him to monetize this, hence fan fiction. How much effort would he be putting into this if the writing wouldn't make him any money, and would it drag on and on like most other fan fiction books? So I go to Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality to download the book. I open up on iBooks and I get started, and oh my goodness, it's 2,281 pages. No way, there's probably just a lot of references, as some books have many of those at the end of the book that make the page length seem much longer. And nope, there's 122 chapters, and the last page of the book is 2,279. Thanks, but no thanks to my friend for recommending me this, but I don't think a week before finals reading this would be appropriate, and there's no way I'm reading a 2,000 plus page, 661,619 words book. Just kidding, I just wanted to read it and not study for finals. I quickly realized that Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality wasn't just a simple fan fiction, where characters fall in love with tiny wild versions of the writer. It's a platform on which the writer bounces off complex ideas in a way that's accessible and just downright fun. This book bears little resemblance to JK Rowling's Oblivious Orphan. This Harry is the beneficiary of a happy foster home and is a stubbornly devout disciple of science. It's from this perspective that Yudkowsky approaches Harry's universe. Rowling was making up the rules of magic as she went along, says Yudkowsky. It presents a very unique challenge to a scientist to make sense of it all. You see, this magical world was just the perfect foil to challenge Yudkowsky into making sense of anything with rationality. A quote from the beginning of the book from Harry illustrates this well. The whole world of a unified universe with mathematically regular laws, that was what had been flushed down the toilet, the whole notion of physics. 3,000 years of resolving big, complicated things into smaller pieces, discovering that the music of the planets was the same tune as a falling apple, finding that the true laws were perfectly universal and had no exceptions anywhere, and took the form of simple math governing the smallest parts. Not to mention that the mind was the brain and the brain was made of neurons. A brain was what a person was. And then a woman, McGonagall, turned into a cat. And so much for all of that.
Can you imagine the look on McGonagall's face if we were late?
Perhaps it would be more useful if I were to transfigure Mr. Potter and yourself into a pocket watch.
That's a really exciting place to start from. Long story short, I pulled 2 all-nighters, and within 3 days I finished the entire book. The book was incredible and beyond anything I could have ever imagined. Although I can't explain to you everything I liked about the book, here are some things that I loved, without going too much into spoilers. Also, quick disclaimer. If you have not read the original 7-book series, go back and read at least book number 1, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. It will help you appreciate this book much more. Number 1. The book breaks all cliches. This includes the hero being completely helpless to the plot at times, coming from an abusive family that Harry did, or plot devices to help the character achieve his mission. None of this is prevalent for the Harry in this book. Harry is smart and he has a vision for what he wants to do in this newfound magical world. In the first chapter of this book, Harry's home is vividly described. Every inch of wall space is covered by a bookcase. Every bookcase has 6 shelves, going almost to the ceiling. Some bookshelves are stacked to the brim with hardback books, science, math, history, and everything else. Other shelves have 2 layers of paperback science fiction, with the back layer of books propped up on old tissue boxes or lengths of wood, so that you can see the back layer of books above the books in the front. And it still isn't enough. Books are overflowing onto the tables and sofas and making little heaps onto the windows. This is the living room of the house occupied by the eminent professor Michael Veers Evans and his wife, Miss Petunia Evans Veers. Unlike the original series, Harry comes from an educated family and seems quite smarter than his age. At the beginning of the book, they are in the middle of an argument of whether magic was fake or actually real, and Harry shows his smarts by applying rationality, but isn't taken seriously as a child. Quoted from the book, Harry's mouth twisted bitterly. He was treated well, probably better than most genetic fathers treated their own children. Harry had been sent to the best primary schools, and when that didn't work out, he was provided with tutors from an endless pool of starving students. Always Harry had been encouraged to study, whatever caught his attention. But all the books that caught his fancy, sponsored in whatever math or science competition he entered. He was given anything reasonable that he wanted, except, maybe, the slightest shred of respect. A doctor teaching biochemistry at Oxford could hardly be expected to listen to the advice of a little young boy. He would listen to show interest, of course. That's what a good parent would do. But take a 10-year-old seriously? Hardly. Sometimes Harry wanted to just scream at his father. Mum, Harry said, if you want to win this argument with Dad, look in chapter 2 of the first book of the Feynman Lectures on Physics. There's a quote there about how philosophers say a great deal about what science absolutely requires, and it is all wrong, because the only rule in science is that the final arbiter is observation, that you just have to look at the world and report what you see. Her mother looks down at him and says, thank you, Harry, but I just want my husband to listen to his wife who loves him and trust him just this once. Harry closes his eyes briefly. Hopeless. Both of his parents were hopeless. This is so funny because Harry was obviously way too smart, much smarter than any 10-year-old possible. However, he was treated like a young kid, and he just wanted to prove himself. In this book, Harry wants to change the world, and he wants to do it as fast as possible. No antagonist or plot device is forcing him to do anything. He just wants what he would call world optimization by taking advantage of magic. To me, I really enjoy the fact that the main character this time is really thoughtful, intelligent, and has many questions to ask. It allows an adult audience to imagine how they would respond if they were a Harry put into a magical world. How would you try to understand this world via rational thinking? I suppose a part of it is also that the author isn't really condensing much. It took 6 chapters to finish up the part about him shopping for school items, quite a bit of internal and thorough narration, and there is a lot of detail regarding his interaction with other people. While it leaves less up to the imagination, it also leaves more to think about because there are questions that are being asked which are very difficult to answer. Point number 2. I really loved how the book was teaching scientific concepts and educational things in a really interesting way. In order to explain what was going on, Yudkowsky uses rationality to explain how Harry begins to understand this newfound world. I think the chapter titles illustrate this well, and they include the fundamental attribution error, positive bias, working in groups, pretending to be wise, and the Machiavellian intelligence hypothesis. Yudkowsky also makes reference to many educational things, such as the Dartmouth Conference in 1945 about artificial intelligence. This historical context was used to illustrate how overly optimistic we are at times, because the scientists in that conference thought that they could create AI within a matter of months. This type of educational context is not, what I'm sure you'll agree, your average fanfiction fodder. In addition, in an interesting dialogue between Harry and Professor McGonagall, Harry is trying to utilize Fermi calculation to come into terms with his newfound wealth. He is trying to estimate how much gold he has, and how much money that would actually amount to if he were to convert that gold into real money. Harry is also comparing and contrasting the modern banking system to the antiquated banking system that the Wizarding World uses. I don't see why certain school subjects couldn't be explained in story format, such as the way finance is being explained here. It promotes a need to understand because it informs the story, which actually serves as an interesting and fun backdrop, as opposed to the normal, boring, textbook dialogue. It allows you to apply what you learned right away within the context of the story. Certainly, it would be more difficult than making your standard textbook, because it's much less systematic. But surely, we could eventually figure out a way to bring that as even a part of an introductory phase to our subject, to help generate interest, like Fermi calculation. What a way to make something much more interesting by helping young Potter figure out what his net worth was. That's extremely fun and memorable, which helps us remember. I certainly can't tell you what I learned from most of my neuroscience courses in university, but I do remember this piece of dialogue between Harry and Professor McGonagall. Beyond teaching complicated scientific concepts in an extremely fun way, there are also various lessons to be learned through Harry. For example, Yudkowsky narrates through Harry that there were probably 1,000 people as intelligent as Einstein for every actual Einstein in history, and that was because those other geniuses hadn't gotten their hands on the one thing you absolutely needed to achieve greatness. They never found an important problem. That's a fantastic quote and also scary. You know, the more I think about that, the more I get the question of, do you discover this important problem due to circumstance, or by you constantly searching for it? I guess it's a bit of both, because obviously the JK Rowling version of Harry didn't have any curiosity over how magic worked, while this Harry had the prerequisite knowledge to try and experiment.
Dirt and rust have no effect on the blade. It only takes in that which makes it stronger.
Okay.
The third thing I loved was the absolutely amazing dialogue between Draco and Harry. In one of their dialogues together, Draco mentions to Harry that he actually took tutoring to learn about how to form relationships. Draco explains to Harry that one of his tutors taught him that people form close friendships by knowing private things about one another, and the reason that most people don't make close friends is because they're too embarrassed to share something really important about themselves. That's a really interesting quote. It's true that when you share something personal, the content will dictate what the other person wants to share. The dialogue continues between Draco and Harry. Harry thinks to himself, sharing something personal is important, but it can't be something so damaging that it reveals a weakness about himself. I guess if you share something personal in the context of someone's weakness, perhaps you have a better chance of gaining the advantage of friendship over them. But is that the goal of every relationship, gaining ownership and leadership? I disagree. For example, what if you are a person who simply wants to learn? Then you should place weakness above strength. Feed the other person's ego so that they're willing to criticize you so that you can build on your weaknesses. On the other hand, it's easy for that person to walk away from you because they feel like they have an advantage over you. So perhaps a balance of those things is essential, but balance depends on whether you want to be a leader, a friend, or a learner. I know there's a million other things I could have listed about the book, but those are the top 3 things I really enjoyed. However, I also like the fact that there was arrogant humor, that there were cool quotes, that Hermione was actually a really important figure and actually got credit for things that she was doing instead of giving all the credit to Harry like the original series. I also love the action-packed chapters that reminded me of some of the scenes in Ender's Game. I guess in conclusion, I really enjoyed the level of purity within fan fiction that doesn't include, at times, the ugly capitalistic society we live in that pervades every single industry. Ultimately, I rank this book as one of my favorite of all time because it doesn't have the pressure of a publisher to condense the writing, because it teaches things in a really interesting way. The weirdness to the magical world is almost used as a way to challenge one's rationality, and I can't help but think that we can similarly apply this type of rationality to make sense of other popular children and young adult science fiction books, in an effort to teach us within a fictional world that we are all familiar with.